It's 2019, Season 4 of Street Fighter 5, and you're a Balrog main who hasn't mixed somebody up with Balrog V-Trigger 1 in 3 years. Everybody's now mashing their light buttons to interrupt your high-low resets. They understand how to defend on block, and they block the high first and react to the low. So how are you going to mix somebody up with this V-Trigger that's gone stale over the years? Let's go ahead and cover that in this video. Alright, so to start off with, I want to do a quick refresher course on the basic high-low mix-ups that happen in Balrog's V-Trigger 1. So to start off with, the best way to test them is to, of course, have your dummy mashing its 3-frame button. And I just want to show how the overhead reset works. So if you cancel your first Rekka into your overhead, you notice that you trade with 3-frame jab, and this will give you conversions if you combo the trade. It gives you enough hit stun to combo another dash punch and keep the pressure going. So basically, overhead on the first Rekka will trade with 3-frame jab and give you trade combos, but it'll just beat 4-frame jab clean. And you can see there I get the trade combo. However, the overhead happens faster than low, so if I go low, I'll get counter hit every time. I do not have enough frame advantage on the spin in order to go low at any point. Because I am, in fact, I believe I'm negative. Yeah, you're negative on the spin itself, so your 4-frame jab is definitely not going to beat a mashed 3-frame. So that means you have to do the overhead right away to condition people to respect the low. However, if I cancel on the second Rekka, oh, the dummy wasn't mashing properly. If I cancel on the second Rekka, they're mashing 3-frame. A reversal 3-frame will beat it every time. If they have a 4-frame, you'll get the trade on the 4-frame jab there. This means that if the opponent knows this sort of mix-up, if you try to do your third Rekka, then do a high-low, like that, mashed buttons 3 or 4-frame will beat the high and the low every single time. So that's sort of the mix-up that's going on there. It's sort of baiting them. Do they want to risk mashing a button in order to interrupt the overhead and you get a trade combo, or are they going to attempt to react block? So that's the mix-up you're playing with there. And so at this point in time, most people understand that. So if you try to do too many Rekkas and try to do a reset at that point, they'll just mash right through it. So the mix-up has kind of lost some of its potential. However, there are now counters to the mashing and other ways you can play with this mind game to actually mix people up who finally understand Balrog V-Trigger 1. Okay, so one of the main counters to people who you know are mashing to interrupt your resets is you don't have to do high or empty spin low in order to mix them up. You actually have the option to do your V-skill plus P-ender, and you can delay this. It's not a 1-frame activation. You kind of have a few frames where you can delay the input and get the hook to come out later, and you can use that in order to bait people to press buttons. So for instance, I can do a little bit of a delay on the hook, and if I did this right away, you know, to just combos, which is a very powerful ender to your V-Trigger pressure, because it gives you an immediate throw or frame trap mix-up. So that's still very solid and safe, but if you know for a fact that people are mashing because they're doing that to interrupt your high-low, you can bait them by doing a lot of Rekkas. And then on the third Rekka, for instance, where you know that any mash button will beat the high or low, instead of doing that, you can just do a delay Rekka or delay V-skill P. And as you see, this hook, when counter hits the opponent, is +4, and it gives you new combo options. So if they're standing, you can combo your standing light punch into standing medium punch, and that can link to big damage. So here, let's just cover that sequence one more time. So I'm going to do the third Rekka instead of doing high-low, delay V-skill P, counter hits, and I get the conversion from that. And that would have stunned if I had the stun on. So you can see it's kind of a risky option as well. I mean, all the options have their risk to it. If that's blocked, the V-skill P, it's -4, so they get like a jab punish. But if it hits counter hit, +4, you can combo your standing light punch to standing medium punch, but it really can also lead to devastating resets. So this is kind of the meta for people who you know are trying to mash to interrupt the high-low resets. So that's a very powerful tool to dissuade people, especially 3-frame jab characters, because after the first Rekka, 3-frame jab will beat any resets after that besides this. So it's very powerful to do that. Another less committal option in order to bait out this mashing to interrupt the high-low reset is to do a specific buffer to counteract their poke. So what I would suggest doing is try doing your Rekkas, and then rather than ending any sort of spin whatsoever, just stop. Just stop here. And you can see the spacing we're at right here. If I press my jab at this spacing, it's just gonna whiff, it's not gonna connect with anything. However, I'm plus when I just kind of end the pressure, +2 on the first Rekka. And I think you're +2 after all the other Rekkas as well. Yeah, you're just +2 all over the place. So you can press buttons there and your buttons will beat their buttons if you choose the right option. So what I like to do against people who are also mashing is this mix-up where I do my dash punch Rekkas and then I do a jab buffer. So what I did right there, if you look at the inputs, is I buffered my EX dash low from my standing light punch. And I did it at such a speed where the EX dash low did not come out on whiff. If I do that too slow, you see I whiff a jab and I get the EX dash low. So if you practice this buffer timing and do it very fast, it becomes really powerful because this is what it looks like in action. So I'm gonna do the Rekkas, stop my Rekka pressure, then buffer jab to EX slow. So this is what it looks like. The combo drop there because I didn't delay enough, but you get the idea. Because I knew the opponent was mashing, I could buffer this jab and interrupt their 3-frame button. And in the case where they aren't mashing, I don't waste any bar. I simply whiff a 4-frame jab, which is probably not going to cause you to get hit because for the most part, they're most likely just defending or they're mashing a reversal and you're going to get hit anyways. So it's a really low risk option. And I like doing that because it's definitely a lot less riskier than the delayed V skill P. So it gives a similar kind of reward to the delayed V skill P. Similar concept, but I think it's a little bit less risky because if they're not mashing, you don't connect point blank with a -4 move. However, it takes some labbing. This is more character specific, so it depends on what option the opponent decides to mash. So you might have to experiment a bit more with that. You can even probably mix in other buttons to buffer there instead, since you are +2. For instance, my standing medium kick will beat that 3-frame jab at that distance. So there's other options you can mix in there that are more character specific, but it's a less committal version of the reset to interrupt the mashing. So at this point, you might be saying, sure, that's all fine and dandy, but I don't have any way to open my opponents up on block when I'm using this V-trigger anymore. Sure, if I get the hit, I can do lots of damage and crazy resets, but how do I open up people who are defending with this V-trigger? Well, the whole meta behind the V-trigger has kind of evolved over a while, but the basic meta was always, if you did your rec on block, you ended the kick one, and at least you have the spacing where lights whiff. So if you do a spin in, you're negative, the jab will interrupt you if you try to do any button here. If I do empty low, I'm gonna get counter hit every time. And if I do this overhead, I'm gonna get interrupted by the 3-frame. However, we all know how this goes out. What you do is you simply sit there and you press your crouching strong after. If they press a 3-frame, most 3-frames are gonna whiff at this range, and you're gonna whiff punish their interrupt attempt with your crouching strong. And that's pretty much like the week 1 meta, right? So how do people start countering that? Well, you're actually -2 when you let the Rekka just rock on block like that. So a lot of characters have these moves that are far-reaching enough so that they don't whiff at that range. So for Kuma, for instance, he has a crouching strong, which is 5 frames. But the idea is, why would I even press that? Because this would just whiff otherwise. If I press my jab, it's going to beat me. So it kind of interrupts me from doing that strategy of sitting here and doing crouching strong to beat the 3-frame. So that there's a mix up there. However, you can see that the overhead will beat that on block. And empty low, the empty spin, the 3-frame beats it. But crouching low is gonna lose every single time. So what other options do I have here besides this super committal overhead? Well, one option is if you have bar, you just EX upper, because in V-trigger, you can cancel that to make it safe. So even if they block, you're going to interrupt that every single time. So most moves that hit at that range are 5 frames or more, meaning you definitely have time for your armor to come out. So this is a great way to just shut this down. It does beefy damage, 160 now, they buffed that in Season 4, and you can make it safe, so it's a really strong option. Another option is the reset we talked about before with the delay V-skill P. If you master this timing, it varies from opponent to opponent and what timing they're pressing their buttons in, but you can mix it up. And you can do the delay. You need to delay very specific amounts to beat 3-frame buttons, but it's definitely possible to catch them mashing doing this string. It's rather precise, but it's definitely possible. So it's another way to just remind the opponent that, hey, you can't just sit here mashing for free every single time. One of my favorite ways to mix people up who are mashing to interrupt resets is to do delay rekkas on block. So you actually have a window where you can delay the rekka cancel, and you can modify this so that it leaves tiny gaps in the pressure string, just big enough for people to try to squeeze out a button, but small enough so that you don't get hit. And that causes them to get clipped for trying to preemptively interrupt any resets. So for instance, one built-in example is heavy punch dash straight and canceled into any kick rekka. There's always a tiny gap there. So if you just throw out this move from full screen and cancel the kick, it will interrupt any mashed 3-frame button. So this becomes very powerful because you can easily convert this. So what I do is you do heavy punch dash straight, kick, V skill P, juggle with the EX. Suddenly, from a random dash punch, you got all this corner carry, and they can just simply die from it. Or of course, if you have super, you can convert that to big damage. But it's not only from the heavy punch dash straight. I mean, you can do it from any punch to kick rekka is usually the best, because the punch rekkas have less block stun than the kicks, so it's easier to set up this delay. So you see the delay there, and usually 2 rekkas with the kicks will let you set up the juggle to V skill P. And that can lead to massive damage out of seemingly nowhere and really clip people for trying to interrupt your resets. And I like it a lot because it's totally non-committal. If they end up just blocking the whole sequence patiently, the worst thing that you did was burn your V-trigger bar and get them into the corner. So it's very little risk to go for. The only way that you're going to get blown up for it is if they're mashing an invincible move like super or an EXDP. So I really like doing that on block. It's a really good way to just randomly get wins, pretty much. Alright, so there you have it. Those are some ways you can make this stale V-Trigger 1 still relevant in 2019. You have lots of options to mix up here to open up your opponents. Sometimes you don't get to employ them. Sometimes people are just so good at defending them that they all seem useless. But you can still get in there, mix up your options, and keep your opponents guessing, and keep cashing out with big damage. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.
That I'm displaying, this is